Be seated. Time is now near at hand, which must probably determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves, whether they are to have any property which they can call their own, whether their houses and farms are to be pillaged and destroyed, and themselves consigned to a state of wretchedness which no human effort will deliver them. The fate of unborn millions will now depend, under God, on the conduct and courage of this army. Our cruel and unrelenting enemy leaves us only the choice of brave resistance or the most abject submission. We have, therefore, to resolve to conquer or die. Let us, therefore, animate and encourage each other and show the whole world that a free man contending for liberty on his own ground is superior to any slavish mercenary on this earth. Victory or death, or death, or death, or death, or death. Victory or death. So, Joseph Reed, what did you think about my speech?
Well, General Washington, it wasn't George Patton or Bill Pullman, but it still works. But, I had my money on Charles Lee.
More like Charles Lee Hoosier.
Horatio Gates?
Horatio, blow your own horn, Gates.
Thomas Conway?
More like Thomas Con Artist.
Well, you're the one who appointed Benedict Arnold the military governor of Philadelphia.
And you're the one who pushed him too far. You're the reason why he turned treasonous and collaborated with our enemies.
Now, so you can hang that one on me, huh? Why don't we skip all that and go straight to the Colonial email?
Great. Glad to. Can't wait to. I'm delighted. But before we do, why don't you take that ridiculous hat off your head?
Well, you look more like your Aunt Mary.
She was a good woman. Anyways, this Colonial email comes from Cliff at cliffnotes.com, and he asks, what happened between episode 1 and the signing of the Treaty of Paris? Well, Cliff, that in itself is a mouthful.
Perhaps I should take this one. Now, as we remember in episode 1, with the events that took place at Lexington and Concord, the Revolutionary War started. It led to an 11-month siege of Boston. Now, the British did try to break that siege at Bunker Hill, but the siege still continued nonetheless. It was only lifted when this gentleman over here deployed artillery on Dorchester Heights, which would have blasted the British in Boston to smithereens. So, General William Howe was smart to evacuate Boston, which took place on March 17th.
The British stationed themselves in Canada, although we knew that they would be back soon, and New York seemed like the most logical place they would strike first. So, we moved our army with haste and took up positions along Brooklyn and Manhattan. We did not have long to wait.
Now, meanwhile, in Philadelphia, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia submitted a resolution for the Declaration of Independence. The opposing colonies, such as South Carolina and Pennsylvania, asked for a delay. So during that delay, Thomas Jefferson, who you kind of look like, John Adams,
Interesting.
Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston wrote and submitted a draft for that Declaration of Independence. It was given to John Hancock, and after a few days of intense debate and compromise, on July 2nd, the resolution was voted on. 12 colonies voted in the affirmative, and one abstention, which was New York. We now had a new country, a republic.
But we didn't have much time to celebrate. The British had sent their largest naval armada the Royal Navy had ever assembled, and they landed off of New York and Staten Island, which they use as a base of operations.
Now, in August, the British landed in Brooklyn. Now, we were able to hold them off, but then General Howe swung around our left flank and attacked us from the rear. Well, our men panicked and they ran. They ran all the way to Brooklyn Heights, where they were trapped. Right behind them was the East River. They had nowhere to go.
So, we withdrew to Manhattan on the night of August 29th. Now,
Oh, wait, was that when Skynet unleashed the nuclear
please shut up, Joseph. So, a thick fog, now I'm talking as thick as pea soup, rolled in and covered our withdrawal and did not dissipate until the last man crossed the East River. Now, this is something I like to call divine providence.
Now, the British finally did invade Manhattan at Kips Bay. And, they pushed all our forces back. We did manage to fight them off very successfully at Harlem Heights, but unfortunately they invaded Lower Manhattan and took the city. Of course, the loyalists there were quite overjoyed.
Jerks.
Now, because of the size of the Royal Navy, it was impossible to continue defending Manhattan. So our army withdrew north of Manhattan to White Plains. And, we fought them there too, but they outflanked us there also.
New York was lost. We had to retreat across the Hudson River into New Jersey and then into Pennsylvania before they had a chance to destroy our entire army.
The war was lost. We were humiliated. And it was freaking cold. We lost all confidence in this guy. We needed new leadership, and most of us turned to General Charles Lee, who was a former British officer.
You know I can hear you whispering.
This was until Friday the 13th, when our favorite general, Charles Lee, was captured by the British in his pajamas. It was a devastating blow.
Look, I tried to get Charles Lee to join me. He ignored my request and challenged my authority. So, him being captured was a blessing in disguise. Disguised in pajamas.
The British took New Jersey and then settled in for a winter's rest. The war was lost.
How many times are you going to say that the war was lost? I, unlike you and a lot of those other jokers, had a plan. And that plan came to fruition on December 25th, 1776, when our army crossed over the frozen Delaware River, marched through the snow into Trenton. And the British never expected it. Not in that kind of weather.
It actually worked. We beat those godless Hessians. And we took Trenton.
Therefore, the war was not lost. In fact, if anything, it breathed life back into the Patriots. Americans everywhere rejoiced. Then we followed up with a fight at Princeton and we won, and we ended up retaking most of New Jersey. Then we settled in for a nice winter's nap in Morristown. So I think that 1776 ended on a rather nice note. Boom.
Well, you know, you're the one who appointed Benjamin. Yeah.
Nope.
Right, let's skip all this and go straight to the Colonial email.
Great. Glad to. Can't wait to. Delighted. But before we do, why don't you take that ridiculous hat off of your head?
Which would have blasted the British into smithereens.
Also known as smithereens.